Good afternoon, and thank you for joining Conversations for College Success. I am your host, Instructor Jones. I want to thank my listeners today and subscribers, which are both students and professionals, for continuing to support this podcast across multiple platforms and throughout the world. And if you're listening today and you are not a subscriber yet, I ask you to become one. If you've been listening since February 25th, 2026, you have probably realized that you've been listening to a podcast series on workplace performance topics. On Wednesday, February 25th, I talked about understanding performance improvement plans, also called PIPs. I talked about what a PIP is, why they exist, and how they affect both employees and managers. On Wednesday, March 4th, I talked about effective communication in the workplace, including the importance of clarity, listening, and respectful conversations. Last Wednesday, March 11th, I talked about giving and receiving feedback. It is important to look at feedback as the bridge between workplace expectations and your workplace performance. Also, each of my 3 previous podcasts has led us to today's topic of motivation and engagement. Once work expectations are clear, work communication is effective, and feedback is constructive, another critical question becomes what motivates employees to do their best work and to stay engaged while doing their best work. And that leads us to today's podcast on motivation and engagement. As an employee and or manager, through self-evaluation, you should be thinking about and answering what truly drives employee motivation, or what drives your employees and what drives you as an employee. What is the difference between motivation and engagement? Also, why engagement is not optional in today's workplace, and how managers and leaders directly influence whether employees feel inspired or disconnected. This conversation matters whether you are a student preparing to enter the workforce, a new professional learning workplace dynamics, or a manager responsible for leading others. Let's talk about motivation. Be aware that motivation is often misunderstood. Many people assume motivation is about pay, titles, or perks. While compensation is very important, it is rarely what sustains performance long term. I will talk about what truly drives employee motivation and how, as managers and leaders, you can intentionally create an engaging workplace culture. Motivation goes beyond pay and perks. It is about purpose, recognition, trust, and growth. Again, it is about purpose, recognition, trust, and growth. You will gain practical insights into how engagement impacts productivity, satisfaction, and retention, and how everyday leadership behaviors can inspire employees to perform at their best. Motivation is about feeling valued, feeling competent, feeling that your work has purpose, and believing that your efforts matter. When employees lack motivation, it often shows up as minimal effort, disengagement, resistance to feedback, or emotional withdrawal from the workplace. And this connects directly with my previous 3 podcasts. If communication is poor or feedback feels punitive instead of developmental, motivation suffers, even when expectations are clear. Now let's talk about engagement, because motivation and engagement are related, but they are not the same. Motivation is internal. Engagement is behavioral. Engaged employees show interest in their work, They take initiative, they collaborate more effectively, and they care about outcomes, not just tasks. You can motivate someone temporarily with incentives, but engagement happens when people consistently feel heard, respected, supported. Again, engagement happens when people consistently feel heard, respected, supported, and challenged in healthy ways. This is why engagement is not an employee problem, it's a leadership responsibility. Managers play a critical role in shaping engagement, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Managers influence workplace culture, psychological safety, trust, and morale. Think back to my podcast on feedback. When feedback is clear instead of vague, timely instead of delayed, constructive instead of critical, employees are more likely to feel motivated to improve rather than feel discouraged. Similarly, when communication is consistent and respectful, employees feel included instead of overlooked. Engagement does not require grand gestures. It often comes from everyday behaviors. Some examples include acknowledging someone's effort, setting realistic expectations, providing opportunities for growth, and following through on commitments. Engagement directly impacts employee productivity, job satisfaction, retention, and overall workplace performance. Disengaged employees do not usually quit right away. They disengage first and then they leave. For students and professionals listening today, this is important. If you ever find yourself disengaged, it is very important to reflect on why and understand it. Is communication clear? Is feedback supportive? Do I feel valued and challenged? For managers, engagement should be viewed as an outcome of leadership, not something employees are expected to create on their own. As I'm ending today's podcast, I would like to bring this series on work performance topics full circle. Performance improvement plans, effective communication, giving and receiving feedback, and motivation and engagement are not separate topics. They are all interconnected and important to workplace performance. When one is weak, the others are affected. When they are aligned, your workplace becomes more productive, more supportive, and more sustainable. I'm going to repeat that. When all are aligned, your workplace becomes more productive, more supportive, and more sustainable. And that is really what organizations want. Next week, in my last podcast in this series, I will continue building on workplace performance foundation and we'll talk about conflict resolution strategies. Because even in motivated and in engaged workplaces, conflict is inevitable. Quite frankly, because in every workplace, conflict is inevitable. And how it is handled makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to Conversations for College Success. I'm Instructor Jones, and if you have any questions, send them to conversationsforcollegesuccess@hotmail.com. Again, send your questions to conversationsforcollegesuccess@hotmail.com. I look forward to talking with you next Wednesday. Goodbye.